Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Finance, joint subcommittees on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. I have the pleasure of chairing today's meeting, and would the committee secretary please call the roll?
Senators Wynn, Titus, Taylor, Assembly Members Anderson, Brown May, Dickman, Hibbets, Mosca, Chair Watts.
And I am here. We have all members present. Thank you. We will be closing budgets for the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, as well as several budgets within the Department of Public Safety. We'll have one public comment period at the end of today's meeting. If you'd like to provide public comment, you can do so in person or via phone by calling 888-475-4499. And when prompted, enter the meeting ID 879-61-992641 and then press pound. As always, you can find that information on our agendas, which are also posted on the Nevada Legislature's website. Please be sure to silence your electronic devices. And I think that is pretty much all the housekeeping we need. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to our fiscal staff to walk us through our budget closings. We'll start with Post.
Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division. The first budget begins on page 3 of the closing packet. It is the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, which has not previously been heard by the subcommittee. The Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training establishes and regulates the minimum qualifications, training, and standards for all peace officers in the state of Nevada. There are no major closing issues for this budget account, and there is one other closing item, which is an update for the records management and tracking system. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $111,138 in fiscal year 27 for the annual fees to update the records management and tracking system. The agency indicates if this is approved, the system update would be approximately 6 months. If funding for the cost to implement the system, which is recommended as a one-time general fund appropriation, is approved through legislation. As such, recommended approval of this decision unit is contingent upon the passage and approval of legislation that includes the one-time general fund appropriation of $92,433 for the implementation costs of the system update. The decision for the subcommittees on page 4. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed as recommended by the governor, contingent upon the passage and approval of legislation that includes a one-time general fund appropriation of $92,433 for the implementation costs of the update to the records management and tracking system. Fiscal staff also requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Members, any questions on this budget? Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
May I? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I move the budget recommendations as read by staff and that we give them authority to make the technical adjustments necessary.
Second.
I have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be at ease for a moment as we transition staff, and then we'll begin with the Department of Public Safety. All right. I think we are all set. So we will now begin going through the DPS budgets. Turn it over to you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Chair Watts. So, good morning, members of the subcommittee. I'm Tom Weber, Program Analyst with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. This morning, I'll be presenting the closing documents for the Department of Public Safety. There are 14 budget accounts with closing recommendations for the subcommittee's consideration, 7 of which were previously heard by the subcommittee on February 14th, and 7 of which are recommended as staff closed budgets. The first budget account for the subcommittee's consideration is the DPS Director's Office budget account, discussion of which begins on page 5 of the closing packet. The DPS Director's Office budget account is funded through the allocation of expenses to other non-allocated budgets in the department. There are 4 major closing issues in this budget account. The first of which pertains to the restructure and expansion of the Research and Planning Technology team. The governor recommends a decrease of $187,912 in highway fund appropriations, a decrease of $558,030 in general fund appropriations, and an increase of $1.4 million in cost allocation reimbursements over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund 2 new positions and associated operating costs beginning October 2025, and the transfer of 4 positions and associated operating costs from other Department of Public Safety budget accounts to this budget account to restructure and expand the Research and Planning Technology team. Included in the recommendation is 1 new IT manager position, 1 new IT professional position, and the transfer of 4 positions from other Department of Public Safety budget accounts. Moving on to page 6 of the closing packet. The 82nd 2023 legislature approved the transfer of 9 positions from other Department of Public Safety budget accounts to the Director's Office budget account to centralize technical positions within various divisions under a Research and Planning Technology team. The structure of the Research and Planning Technology team, as approved by the 82nd legislature, is shown in the table on page 6, and consists of a radio management group responsible for update planning department-wide, an operational maintenance technology group, tasked with technology inventory, and the Research and Planning Technology group, which includes 2 positions funded from the Department of Public Safety's Records, Communications, and Compliance Division. During the 82nd legislative session, the department indicated that as the Research and Planning Technology team progressed, it would expand its capacity to accommodate other agencies within the department to improve efficiencies, as well as technology usage, support, and development. And according to the department, its current request to restructure the Research and Planning Technology team would allow it to transition law enforcement applications currently supported by the Office of the Chief Information Officer back in-house under the department's purview. The 6 positions recommended are outlined in the table on page 7 of the closing document, and the 2 new positions include the an IT manager to lead the Research and Planning Technology team and report directly to the director and deputy director, and an IT professional position which would ensure compliance with policies and procedures. So moving on to page 8 of the closing packet. During the February 14th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired about the Department of Public Safety's long-term plan for developing the Research and Planning Technology team and whether additional resources would be needed to meet long-term goals. And in response, the department indicated that development of the team was nearly complete, and that the OCIO would continue providing support for IT and desktop services and the department would evaluate the effectiveness of the 6 recommended positions in providing support and maintenance of other internal software and equipment, and would request additional resources if needed in future biennia. So, as shown in the middle of page 8, the decisions for the subcommittee are: does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $269,828 in fiscal year 26 and $343,429 in fiscal year 27 in cost allocation reimbursements for 1 new IT manager position and 1 new IT professional position and associated operating costs, to expand and restructure the research and planning technology team as recommended by the governor in decision unit E285, and/or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $367,269 in fiscal year 26 and $378,673 in fiscal year 27 in cost allocation reimbursements over the 2025-27 biennium, to transfer in and change the funding source of 4 positions and associated operating costs, to expand and restructure the research and planning technology team as recommended by the governor in decision units E501, E503, E901, and E903.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Members, any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll continue what's beginning to be a recurring theme, is just acknowledging that our budget situation in some cases is unknown and in some cases is known, and that's not pretty. So we're unable, unfortunately, to approve all the positions that I think we'd like to approve and that staff would like, but I would like to make a motion in that vein. I just wanted to give a little precursor. Yes, so I recommend the approval of 1 new IT manager position and the associated operating costs to expand and restructure the research and planning technology team, but do not recommend approval of 1 new IT professional position and associated expenditures, and those are in decision unit E285. Additionally, I do recommend approval of $367,269 in fiscal year 2026 and $378,673 in fiscal year 27 in cost allocation reimbursements over the 25 to 27 biennium, to transfer in and change the funding source of 4 positions and the associated operating costs, to expand and restructure the research and planning technology team as recommended by the governor in decision units E501, E503, E901, and E903.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Chair Taylor and we have a second by Assemblymember Brown-May. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The second major closing issue for the Director's Office budget account begins on page 8 of the closing packet and is in regards to a new background investigation technician position, for which the governor recommends cost allocation reimbursements of $72,642 in fiscal year 26 and $90,572 in fiscal year 27 to fund 1 new background investigation technician position and associated operating costs beginning October 2025. The Director's Office is currently authorized for 4 background investigation technician positions. The governor recommends 1 additional position to support the public safety background unit based on projected increases in the number of applications. So I'm going to move on to page 9. Details provided during the hearing on February 14th. According to the department, it takes the public safety background unit an average of 3 weeks to complete a pre-employment background investigation for candidates applying for both sworn and non-sworn positions. The department indicates, since hiring 2 new recruiters and initiating a recruitment campaign in fiscal year 2025, the number of candidates applying for positions has doubled, and the time to complete a pre-employment background check would increase beyond the current average of 3 weeks. Also, during the hearing on February 14th, the subcommittee expressed interest in how the estimated timeline to complete a pre-employment background check would be impacted if the request for an additional background investigation technician position were approved, and the department indicated while an additional position would enable it to maintain the current 3-week average of processing pre-employment background checks, one additional position would not be sufficient to reduce processing time. So, as shown on page 9, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of cost allocation reimbursements of $72,642 in fiscal year 26 and $90,572 in fiscal year 27 to establish one new background investigation technician position and associated operating costs to support the public safety background unit as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move recommendations as read by staff.
Second.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor and a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. The third major issue for the DPS Director's Office budget account begins on page 9 and is for a new digital media specialist position, for which the governor recommends cost allocation reimbursement revenue of $91,088 in fiscal year 26 and $115,528 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new digital media specialist position and associated operating costs beginning October 2025. The Director's Office is currently authorized for one public information officer position, which the department indicates is insufficient to manage the online presence of the Department of Public Safety. So, moving on to page 10. To expand its social media presence and improve online engagement, the governor recommends one new digital media specialist position for the Department of Public Safety. And by actively creating and posting content, the department's goal is to gain followers on social media, which the department indicates would increase effectiveness of safety campaigns, enhance recruitment and hiring efforts, and improve participation during community outreach events. During the February 14th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired how the addition of a digital media specialist position would enhance public safety, and in response, the department indicated the digital media specialist position would assume responsibility for gathering and processing media that could be used to promote department activities and would free up the public information officer to respond to additional media requests. So the decision for the subcommittee, as shown on page 10 of the closing packet, is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of cost allocation reimbursements of $91,088 in fiscal year 26 and $115,528 in fiscal year 27 to establish one new digital media specialist position and associated operating costs as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this case, I do not recommend approval of cost allocation reimbursements of $91,088 in fiscal year 2026 and $115,528 in fiscal year 2027 to establish one new digital media specialist position or the associated costs.
Second.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. The fourth issue for the Department of Public Safety budget account, discussion of which begins on page 10 of the closing packet, is in regards to a new office location in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $3,482,649 in general funds, $1.8 million in highway funds, and $738,117 in other funding over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund additional non-state-owned rent costs due to the Department of Public Safety moving to a new office location on Bermuda Road in Las Vegas. The Department of Public Safety moved to a new office in Las Vegas over the 2023-2024 interim, which increases total non-state-owned building rent costs among 10 Department of Public Safety budget accounts. The department indicates that as of January 31st, 2025, all divisions except for the Training Division and the Evidence Vault have moved into the new location in the Bermuda building. The Training Division is anticipated to stay at its current lease location until the current training academy is completed in May 2025, and the Evidence Vault is anticipated to remain with the Freeway and Arterial System of Transportation, also known as the FAST building, shared with the Nevada Department of Transportation until funding can be secured for needed improvements to the Bermuda building to accommodate the Evidence Vault. The department further indicates the Training Division, Investigation Division, and Office of Professional Responsibility have additional ongoing lease agreements for which the Department of Administration is seeking new tenants. Okay. The department indicates the additional rent expenses for fiscal year 25 are being paid from the Governor's Finance Office Special Appropriations Budget Account with return to work funds approved through Senate Bill 456 of the 82nd 2023 legislature. So some post-hearing update information. During the February 14th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired about the need to move and consolidate the Department of Public Safety's leases to a new single location in southern Nevada, and whether any of the department's budget accounts would continue paying rent for vacated leases. The Department of Administration communicated its intent is to buy out the two long-term lease agreements that the Department of Public Safety still has in place for the Investigation Division and the Training Division. And following the budget hearing, the Department of Administration confirmed its plan to buy out the vacated leases, which are set to expire in fiscal year 29, using return to work funds for an estimated cost of $786,578. And furthermore, the governor's recommended 2025 capital improvement program through CIP Project 25C16 includes funding to purchase the Bermuda building. And the Department of Administration did provide estimates regarding the cost to complete the Evidence Vault build-out, indicating that it would total approximately $7.8 million. So as shown on the bottom of page 11, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $3 million total, $482,649 of which are general funds, $1.8 million of which are highway funds, and $738,117 in other funding over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund additional non-state-owned rent costs due to the Department of Public Safety moving to a new office location in Las Vegas as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Members, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the recommendations as read by staff.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown-May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. On page 12 of the closing packet, there are 10 other closing items recommended by the governor, all of which appear reasonable to fiscal staff. As such, fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 10 be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the recommendations. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Promotion.
I'll take it, sure.
My mistake. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the recommendations as read by staff.
I'll second that motion.
Hey, it's a busy week.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor and a second from Vice Chair Brown May. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I'll now move on to the second budget account for the subcommittee's consideration, which begins on page 13 of the closing packet. And this is the training division. Funding for the training division is based on a percentage of the total number of officers trained for the two largest divisions in the Department of Public Safety, which are the Nevada Highway Patrol and the Division of Parole and Probation. There are four major closing issues for the training division, the first of which pertains to a new DPS major position in Las Vegas. So the governor recommends a total of $181,519, $88,946 of which are general funds, $92,573 of which are highway funds in fiscal year 26, and $176,846 in fiscal year 27, of which $86,656 are general funds and $90,190 are highway funds. And this is to fund one DPS major position and associated operating costs in Las Vegas with a start date of July 2025. The governor recommends a DPS major position to serve as chief of the training division, and the current chief is as a DPS captain position. So I'm moving on to page 14 of the closing packet. As the training division continues to grow to meet the demands of employees, the agency indicates having both a DPS major position and a DPS captain position would ensure a member of command is available in both the northern and southern regions of the state. During the budget hearing on February 14th, the subcommittee inquired about the need for a new DPS major position as opposed to reclassifying the existing DPS captain position to a DPS major position to serve as chief of the training division. And in response, the department indicated an additional leadership position is needed to meet increasing demands for training, continuing education, and professional development for non-sworn and sworn staff as the training division continues to grow. As such, the decision for the subcommittee, as shown on page 14 of the closing packet, is: does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $358,365, $175,602 of which are general funds, and $182,763 of which are highway funds, over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund one new DPS major position and associated operating costs to serve as chief of the training division as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
I was going to say something else, but I'll just say thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we not approve to fund one new training officer position and associated operating costs, and instead, I recommend approval to fund one new program officer position and associate. Am I on the wrong motion?
Yeah, we're back one.
Oh, I thought we did that one. That's because I was thrown off by Mr. President. 'Cause this motion, I move that we accept as read by staff.
I'll second that motion.
All right. So this is for the DPS major. We have a motion to make the recommendation as read by staff, second by Chair Taylor, second by Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on that motion? Senator Nguyen.
I'm looking at this major position, and I don't know if this. I guess I should have asked this during questions, so I'll just save this for later. How about that?
Okay. No question then. Any question from other members of the committee? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The second major issue begins on page 14 of the closing packet and pertains to a new training officer position for the Department of Public Safety Southern Command. The governor recommends a total of $103,932, $50,928 of which are general funds, $53,004 of which are highway funds in fiscal year 27 or in fiscal year 26, and for fiscal year 27, a total of $100,558, $49,273 of which are general funds, and $51,285 of which are highway funds, to fund one new training officer position and associated operating costs for the Southern Command beginning July 2025. The training division is currently authorized for one training officer position who is responsible for developing trainings for all divisions in the department. The training division has two separate training academies. One is located in Las Vegas and the other is located in Carson City. According to the agency, the existing training officer position is assigned to the Northern Command and is responsible for establishing professional development courses, scheduling and developing trainings, and overseeing continuing education requirements for peace officer standards and training in both the northern and southern regions of the state. The agency also indicates that while the existing training officer position tracks the training records of sworn personnel, it has never tracked the training records of non-sworn personnel. According to the training division, the additional training officer position and the additional training officer position and the existing training officer position would be designated as in-service coordinators, one each for the Northern and Southern Command, and would work with division representatives to update the peace officer standards and training and department-mandated continuing education courses. During the hearing, the subcommittee inquired how an additional training officer position would ensure the training needs of non-sworn staff are met, and in response, the agency indicated having a second training officer position would enable the training needs and records of sworn and non-sworn staff to be better tracked and would allow for the facilitation of additional leadership trainings to be provided to non-sworn staff. To allow time for recruitment and onboarding, new positions generally begin in October of the first year of the biennium, and the agency indicates that it would, agree with an adjustment, a technical adjustment to change the start date of this training officer position from July to October 2025. And so, as shown on page 15, this decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $179,892, $88,147 which are general funds, and $91,745 of which are highway funds, over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund one new training officer position and associated operating costs to support the training division's Southern Command, inclusive of the noted technical adjustment to change the position start date from July to October 2025.
Members, any? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for staff. Do you have an idea about what the ratio of training officers are to cadets / people they're training? I mean, how many people are sitting there training, and because they're not there all the time and we know we're going to delay it, but do they train 20 cadets and they have 20 training officers? I just was curious.
Thank you for the question, Senator Titus. Tom Weber for the record. I don't have the specific ratio. I do know that there's a DPS sergeant stationed at both training academies, but as far as the officers to cadets, I don't have that information on me.
Just to follow up on that, then, are these training sites, both north and south, occupied year-round, or do they have just a 3-month program and then there's nothing that happens other than they look at their training and regs? And I'm sorry, they may have said this during the hearing, but I just needed some clarification. We're spending year-round money are they year-round occupied positions?
How about we call up the agency to answer this? And we're fine to get some clarification, but I do just want to make sure that we don't go all the way back into hearing the budgets. 'Cause
Granted, because this, again, these new positions, I just want to make sure that they're busy all the time.
Sherry Brigham, Deputy Director for the Department of Public Safety. No, those both training divisions run full-time. We have 2 6-month training at each one of them, if that answers your question.
Really, I just needed confirmation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up. Members, any additional questions? Okay, seeing none. I think there was a sneak preview of this, but I'll turn it over to Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. That was unintentional, but this is where I'd like to make an adjustment from the recommendation in the closing document. I recommend that we do not approve the funding of 1 new training officer position and associated operating costs, and instead, I recommend approval to fund 1 new program officer position and associated operating costs to support the training division Southern Command, inclusive of the noted technical adjustments to change the position start date from July to October 2025.
Second that motion.
Got a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. The third major closing issue for the training division begins on page 15 of the closing packet and pertains to 2 new DPS sergeant positions, for which the governor recommends $244,230, $119,672 of which are general funds, $124,558 of which are highway funds in fiscal year 26, and $271,210, $132,893 of which are general funds, and $138,317 of which are highway funds in fiscal year 27 to fund 2 new DPS sergeant positions and associated operating costs. 1 DPS sergeant position would be located in the Southern Command and is requested to begin July 2025, while the other DPS sergeant position would be located in Carson City and is recommended to begin October 2025. So, excuse me, moving on to page 16 of the closing packet, as mentioned, the governor recommends 2 additional DPS sergeant positions, and they would be responsible for developing an in-service training program within the training division and providing additional leadership support. According to the agency, mandatory annual training for officers is provided and monitored by individual divisions, making it difficult to ensure consistent training is provided to both sworn and non-sworn staff throughout the state. To allow for the same training to be provided to all divisions and commands, the agency indicates the development of an in-service program within the training division is necessary. And during the February 14th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired about the specific training gaps that currently exist within the Department of Public Safety that the 2 new DPS sergeants would address. In response, the agency indicated the positions would alleviate the workload of the existing DPS sergeants overseeing the training academies located in Las Vegas and Carson City by assuming responsibility for in-service trainings and professional development courses. The agency confirmed both recommended DPS sergeant positions should be budgeted at a grade 43, which aligns with the Division of Human Resource Management's classification for a DPS sergeant position. Fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to correct the grade for the 2 positions from a grade 42 to a grade 43. And as shown on page 16 of the closing packet, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $558,298, $272,096 of which would be general funds, $283,202 of which would be highway funds, over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund 2 new DPS sergeant positions and associated costs to support an in-service training program within the training division, inclusive of the noted technical adjustment.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this item? Assemblymember Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify the dollar amount. I show mine in the boxes, a $3,000 difference is $555,298. I just want to make sure that that's correct, or
Thank you for the question. It's Assemblymember Brown May, Tom Weber for the record. That's correct. I may have misstated, but the total figure in the decision box is $555,298.
Thank you very much. Glad we got that clear. Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept the recommendation as read by staff, inclusive of the noted technical adjustment.
second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The fourth major issue for the training division pertains to the transfer of 8 training officer positions, and this is discussed beginning on page 16. The governor recommends transferring a total of $3.1 million, $1.5 million of which are general funds and $1.6 million of which are highway funds, over the 2025-2027 biennium to transfer from the training division budget account 4 DPS officer positions and associated operating costs to the Nevada Highway Patrol Division budget account in Decision Unit E904, and 4 DPS officer positions and associated operating costs to the Division of Parole and Probation budget account in Decision Unit E905. So moving on to page 17 of the closing packet, if approved, this change would result in a rotating pool of DPS officer positions to serve as training officers on a temporary basis, as opposed to the current structure of dedicated permanent training officer positions in the training division budget account. According to the agency, DPS officer positions serving as training officers in the training division are responsible for training cadets to become officers. Historically, training officers have been permanently assigned to the training academies, which the agency indicates has resulted in stagnation in innovative training and a lack of general enthusiasm. By restructuring the training officers to temporary duty assignments, the positions would be rotated to the training division from the Nevada Highway Patrol Division and the Division of Parole and Probation. The agency indicates this structure would allow for more relevant trainings and the ability for cadets to learn from active DPS officers with current field experience, as the rotating training officers would have more exposure to the dynamic nature of police work. Once transferred to the Nevada Highway Patrol Division and the Division of Parole and Probation, the agency indicates these 8 training officer positions would commit to a 2-year temporary assignment to the training division before returning to their respective home divisions. The agency indicates additional benefits associated with the change of the DPS training officer positions to temporary duty assignments would include an opportunity for paid overtime, access to equipment not currently offered within the training division, and supervisory training opportunities while with the training division. And in response to questions during the budget hearing on February 14th, the agency indicated it is important to limit the amount of time a training officer spends working in the training division, as policing is a perishable skill, and it is important for cadets to be trained by officers recently reassigned from their respective positions in the field to ensure credible and relevant skills are taught to cadets. So moving on to page 18, the agency also indicated training officer positions were already being temporarily rotated to and from the training division, and the divisions of Nevada Highway Patrol and Parole and Probation were large enough to absorb the additional overtime and equipment expenses associated with the temporary assignments using vacancy savings and federal grant funding. So the decisions for the subcommittee, as shown on page 18 of the closing packet, are, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of A, the transfer of 1.5 million, 756,610 of which are general funds, 787,493 of which are highway funds, over the 2025-2027 biennium to transfer 4 DPS officer positions and associated operating costs from the Training Division budget account to the Nevada Highway Patrol Division budget account as recommended by the Governor in Decision Unit E904, and/or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of 1.5 million, 745,159 of which are general funds, 775,575 of which are highway funds over the 2025-2027 biennium to transfer 4 DPS officer positions and associated operating costs from the Training Division budget account to the Division of Parole and Probation budget account as recommended by the Governor in Decision Unit E905.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recommend both A and B as noted on the closing documents and recommended by staff.
A second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. On page 18 of the closing packet, there are 5 other closing items that are shown for the Training Division, all of which appear reasonable to fiscal staff. And as such, fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 4 be closed as recommended by the Governor. Other closing item 5 be closed consistent with the subcommittee's closing recommendation of major closing issue 4 in the DPS Director's Office budget account, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Members, any questions on these other closing items? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I move approval and acceptance of the recommendations as noted by staff, including the permission to make the technical adjustments as necessary.
Second.
I've got a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. The third budget account for the subcommittee's consideration begins on page 21 of the closing packet, and it is in regards to the DPS Public Safety one-shots budget account. There's one major closing issue for this account, which pertains to one-time general fund appropriations for a recruitment campaign. The Governor recommends one-time general fund appropriations of $420,463 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium to fund a recruitment campaign targeting DPS officer and public safety dispatcher classifications for the Department of Public Safety. The Public Safety one-shots budget account does not traditionally include Governor-recommended decision units, but rather serves as a central pass-through budget account within DPS to house one-time appropriations included in legislation. The Governor's budget, as originally submitted, recommends one-time general fund appropriations in the Public Safety one-shots budget account to extend a contract with All-Star Talent to continue a recruitment campaign targeting DPS officer and public safety dispatcher classifications. Funding for the contract was approved at the December 12th, 2024 Interim Finance Committee meeting, which implements, and this recruitment campaign implements a social media-driven platform that helps create a customized recruitment website, enhances the department's social media advertisements, and creates a candidate communication platform to include text and email communication, among other features. And as previously mentioned, this budget account does not traditionally include Governor-recommended decision units, and as such, on January 27th, the Governor's Finance Office submitted Budget Amendment A251884730 to remove the one-time funding for the recruitment campaign from the public safety one-shots budget account and to instead fund the recruitment campaign with one-time funding in legislation for one-time appropriations. So moving on to page 22. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee asked for a status update on the implementation of the All-Star recruitment campaign since December of 2024, when additional funding and whether additional funding would be requested to continue the campaign beyond the 2025-2027 biennium. And in response, the department indicated that while it anticipates a need to continue marketing campaigns targeting its officer and public safety dispatcher classifications, the department was still considering whether the contract with All-Star Talent was the best option to move forward. And as noted, the governor's finance office submitted a bill draft request to fund the recruitment campaign with one-time general fund appropriations. And if the budget amendment were approved, the one-time funding for the recruitment campaign would be considered during a future bill hearing. And the decision for the subcommittee, as shown on page 22, of the closing packet is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $420,463 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium to fund a recruitment campaign in this budget account as recommended by the governor, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of budget amendment A251884730 to eliminate general fund appropriations of $420,463 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium for the recruitment campaign in Decision Unit E280, and instead consider this recommendation through the bill process once the legislation is introduced for the one-time general fund appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Members, any questions on this item? Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recommend that we approve a budget amendment A251884730 to eliminate general fund appropriations of $420,463 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium for the recruitment campaign in Decision Unit E280, and instead consider this recommendation through the bill process once the legislation is introduced for the one-time general fund appropriations.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on this item? I will just take one moment to note, too, that, most agencies do not have a budget account dedicated to one-shots, and that is something that is just traditionally handled through the legislative process and dedicated bills. So I think at some point we need to figure out how to get rid of this budget account and have the agency's one-shots handled the same way they are for other agencies across the state. That is not included in the motion, but I thought it was important to get my thoughts on that on the record. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division, for the record. The fourth budget account for the subcommittee's consideration today begins on page 23 of the closing packet and is for the Nevada Highway Patrol Division. And the Nevada Highway Patrol budget account is primarily funded with highway fund appropriations, reimbursement for contract services, and transfers, and receives a small amount of general fund appropriations to support dignitary protection activities. There are two major closing issues in this budget account, the first of which pertains to a new program officer position for the tow program, and the governor recommends highway fund appropriations of $68,552 in fiscal year 26 and $84,636 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new program officer position and associated operating costs beginning October 2025. And the program officer position would serve as tow program manager and take over those responsibilities from the DPS lieutenant position currently managing the tow program. And so moving on to page 24, According to the agency, the shift of administrative responsibilities associated with the tow program to a dedicated program officer would improve contract compliance and coordination among tow companies and allow for better allocation of resources. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee did not raise any concerns regarding the recommendation. We don't have a quorum. The decision for the subcommittee, as shown on page 24, is does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of highway fund appropriations of $68,552 in fiscal year 26 and $84,636 in fiscal year 27 to establish one new program officer position and associated operating costs to serve as manager for the Nevada Highway Patrol's tow program as recommended by the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Members, is there any discussion on this item? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to just take a 1-minute recess. All right. I think we'll convene the committees back to order. We had the potential recommendation read by staff, so with no discussion, I'll turn it over to Chair Taylor to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the subcommittee accept the recommendation as read by staff.
Second.
I have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. The second major issue for the Nevada Highway Patrol budget account concerns a new program officer position for the Ignition Interlock program, as discussed on page 24 of the closing packet. In this recommendation, the governor is recommending fee revenue of $68,552 in fiscal year 26 and $84,636 in fiscal year 27 to fund one program officer position and associated operating costs beginning October 2025 to support the Ignition Interlock program. The recommended program officer position would be supported by fee revenue transferred in from the DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account, but it is unclear if sufficient fee revenue would be available to support the position over the 2025-2027 biennium. As background, the Ignition Interlock program that is overseen by the Department of Public Safety. The program is used to certify ignition interlock devices. And the department created a non-executive budget account, a DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account, with the goal of supporting the Ignition Interlock program with fee revenue collected from vendors who install the Ignition Interlock devices. It was originally anticipated the agency would begin collecting fee revenue to support the program in fiscal year 23, but due to a delay in drafting of regulations, the agency anticipates fees will not be collected until fiscal year 25, and no fees have been collected to date. The agency currently utilizes a management analyst position to support the program. So moving on to page 25. During the budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired when DPS expects to receive legislative commission approval to establish regulations for collecting fees to support the Ignition Interlock program, and how much fee revenue would be collected over the 2025-2027 biennium. And in response, the agency indicated while the public hearing required to draft the regulations had taken place, revisions to the regulations were still under review by the Legislative Council Bureau's Legal Division. I briefly mentioned the DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account, and that was created in fiscal year 24. And when that budget account was created, the agency initially projected $364,500 in fee revenue would be collected annually from 11 Ignition Interlock installation centers. And the agency further indicated it expects the number of vendors it works with through the Ignition Interlock program to increase over time, which in turn would generate additional revenue. The subcommittee, during that hearing, the subcommittee expressed interest in how the agency would fund the recommended program officer position if the projected Ignition Interlock program fee revenue collected over the 2025-2027 biennium was insufficient. And in response, the agency indicated it had initially requested highway funds to support the position, which is the same source of funding for the management analyst position, but it did not know whether sufficient fee revenue would be collected to address salary and operational expenses. And so following that budget hearing, the Governor's Finance Office submitted Budget Amendment A255-674-713 on March 18th and to change the recommended funding source for the program officer position from fee revenue to highway fund appropriations, and eliminated and the elimination of the recommended transfer of Ignition Interlock program fee revenue. If the subcommittee recommends approval of the recommended program officer position and the budget amendment to change the position's funding source, it may wish to express its intent that highway fund appropriations would be utilized as one-time funding over the 2025-2027 biennium to allow the agency sufficient time to establish regulations and collect fee revenue. And the agency should submit an enhancement request to the 84th 2027 legislature to adjust the position's funding source from highway fund appropriations to Ignition Interlock program fee revenue. Alternatively, the subcommittee could recommend approval of the program officer position but delay the start date of the position to July 1st, 2026, so the beginning of fiscal year 27, to fund the position in fiscal year 27 with Ignition Interlock program fees. Given the uncertainty expressed regarding the timeline to implement the Ignition Interlock program and the level of fees that may be collected once the program is implemented, the subcommittee may wish to recommend the issuance of a letter of intent directing the agency to provide a status update on the implementation of the program, including its progress on finalizing regulations and establishing the fees necessary to support the program. So, moving on to page 26. The decisions for the subcommittee are shown in the middle of page 26. And the decisions are, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of decision unit E277 as amended through budget amendment A255674713 to replace the recommended transfer of fee revenue from the DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account and instead utilize one-time highway fund appropriations totaling $68,552 in fiscal year 26 and $84,636 in fiscal year 27 to support one program officer position and associated operating costs to support the Ignition Interlock program? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of one new program officer position with a start date of July 1st, 2026 and associated operating costs totaling $84,636 in fiscal year 27, funded with fee revenue transferred from the DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account to support the Ignition Interlock program? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend a letter of intent directing the agency to provide a status update on the implementation of the program, including its progress on finalizing regulations and establishing the fees necessary to support the program?
Thank you. Members, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee accept the recommendations contained in number 2 and 3 as read by staff.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? I think I'll just note that we want this program to be a success, and we think it's best to give it a little bit of time so that it can be set up and sustained by the fee revenue as had been discussed. So, seeing no other discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. There are 25 other closing items in the Nevada Highway Patrol budget account, 20 of which are outlined in the table spanning pages 26 and 27 of the closing packet, and all 25 other closing items appear reasonable to fiscal staff. So as such, the decision as shown on page 28 is, or fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 20 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 21 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 4 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. Other closing item 23 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 1 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. Other closing item 24 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 4 in the Training Division budget account. Other closing item 25 be closed with the noted technical adjustment and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee accept staff recommendation as read and allow them to make the technical adjustments as necessary.
Second.
I have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. So now we're moving on to the fifth budget account for the subcommittee's consideration today, which is the Highway Safety Grants account, and begins on page 31 of the closing packet. The Highway Safety Grants account contains the activities funded through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program for commercial motor vehicle safety enforcement and education programs. There's one major closing issue, and it pertains to 6 new commercial vehicle safety inspector positions, for which the governor recommends Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program grant funds of approximately $511,598 in fiscal year 26 and $601,730 in fiscal year 27 to fund 6 commercial vehicle safety inspector positions and associated operating costs beginning October 2025. According to the agency, commercial vehicle safety inspectors allow state troopers to focus on the performance of targeted roving enforcement activities as opposed to inspection activities at fixed locations. According to the agency, the Nevada Highway Patrol is required to maintain enforcement activity levels, including commercial motor vehicle safety inspections, at average levels established in fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 pursuant to Title 49 of the Code of Regulations. Moving on to page 32. Following a review of the associated federal regulations, that 2014-15 average does not appear to be a federally mandated target, but it's rather a maintenance of effort threshold with which, if met, would allow the agency to receive additional grant reimbursement for non-commercial motor vehicle inspection activities. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program grant is awarded on an annual basis and is sufficient to fund the cost of the recommended positions according to the agency. There is a state match component, and that's met through in-kind salary contributions from physicians that support the program. And according to supporting documentation, funding to support the recommended new positions was included in the most recent commercial motor vehicle safety plan submitted to the federal government on January 22nd, 2025, which the agency indicates has been approved. And during the budget hearing on February 14th, the subcommittee expressed interest in the agency's plan to address the maintenance of effort threshold requirement of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program grant, the MSCAP grant, MICSAP grant. And as testified to during the budget hearing, the agency indicated the additional 6 commercial vehicle safety inspectors could perform approximately 6,912 additional safety inspections per year, which, when combined with the activities performed in fiscal year 25 by existing positions, it would exceed that 2014-2015 maintenance of effort threshold. As shown on page 32, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of $511,598 in fiscal year 26 and $601,730 in fiscal year 27 in Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program grant funding to establish 6 new commercial vehicle safety inspector positions and associated operating costs to support the agency's commercial enforcement section.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the recommendation as read by staff.
Second.
Got a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. There are 5 other closing items in this budget account. They're all described in the table on the bottom of page 32, and there are no major issues were identified. Okay. Thank you. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 5 be closed as recommended by the governor, and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Members, any questions on the other closing items? Seeing none, Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the recommendation as read by staff and allowing them to make the technical adjustments as necessary.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on these items? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The sixth budget account for the subcommittee's consideration today begins on page 35, and it's for the DPS Investigation Division. The primary missions of the division are to provide comprehensive investigative services upon request to all criminal justice agencies. There are two major closing issues for this budget account, the first of which pertains to digital forensics and cold case operation support. The governor recommends to support digital forensics and cold case operations. The governor recommends general fund appropriations totaling $771,847 in fiscal year 26 and approximately $900,000 in fiscal year 27 to fund 6 new positions and associated operating, equipment, and vehicle costs, and vendor costs for license agreements for software utilized in digital forensics investigations. The governor also recommends the transfer of 1 position and associated operating and associated costs totaling approximately $200,000 in fiscal year 26 and approximately $216,545 in fiscal year 27 from the Division of Parole and Probation budget account to this budget account through Decision Unit E901. According to the agency, additional resources are needed to supplement existing efforts related to digital forensics and cold case review and support. The agency indicates it currently has 1 full-time dedicated DPS officer position and 1 DPS sergeant position assisting on a case-by-case basis to support digital forensics investigations. Additionally, the agency indicates it does not have any positions dedicated to cold case review, and this results in existing positions being pulled away from other law enforcement investigations to assist in conducting digital forensics and cold case operations. The investigation division is also the primary entity responsible for conducting digital investigations and cold case reviews for the Department of Public Safety, utilizing up-to-date training, software, and equipment to support all divisions within the department as well as outside agencies. And the agency indicates, given the pervasive nature of digital devices, digital evidence, including email history, text messages, videos, browsing, and location history, is a critical component of almost all criminal investigations. And requests for service and statistics regarding the number of devices that the agency received, that were received by the Digital Investigative Unit for analysis in calendar year 24 are shown in the table on the bottom of page 36. So, and moving on to page 37, as mentioned, this recommendation is for 6 new positions, which are the duties of which are outlined on page 37, and include 1 DPS sergeant, 1 DPS officer position, who would be located in northern Nevada beginning October 2025 and would complement the duties performed by the existing DPS officer in southern Nevada, who is currently dedicated to the Digital Investigative Unit. And then, according to the agency, cold case review would also be a responsibility of the DPS officer positions while assigned to the Digital Investigative Unit. And the recommendation also includes the transfer of 4 management analyst positions, and the agency's intent is to reclassify the 4 recommended management analyst positions to property and evidence technician positions, which is not currently an approved class specification. And then there's the transfer of 1 DPS officer position from the Division of Parole and Probation. The Investigation Division created and began managing the department's Digital Investigative Unit in 2023, which consolidated the digital forensics resources of the Division of Parole and Probation and the Investigation Division. According to the agency, a DPS officer position serving as a task force officer who was previously assigned from the Division of Parole and Probation to the Investigation Division to conduct digital investigations, but that position is currently vacant. And the agency indicates transferring that vacant DPS officer position from the Division of Parole and Probation to the Investigation Division would help the Investigation Division meet its statutory responsibilities and ensure consistency in policies and operations. And there's also a recommendation for digital forensic software support, and contingent, and the approval of that decision is contingent on the approval of the 6 positions recommended in Decision Unit E275. On page 38, during the March 5th budget hearing, so this was actually heard at the second DPS budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired about the resources available to conduct digital forensics investigations related to cold cases and how the recommended positions would benefit cold case review. In response, the agency indicated that due to staffing levels and caseloads, existing cold cases are currently reviewed by DPS officer positions in the agency's major crimes unit as new information is received or as current case volume allows. The subcommittee also expressed interest regarding the current time frame for processing internal and external requests for digital forensics review and how the recommended positions would impact this time frame. In response, the agency indicated it could not provide a specific time frame as the amount of time needed to respond to requests depends on the type and age of the device being processed, with new devices being submitted daily. And devices that are involved in major crimes often take priority, resulting in personnel working on multiple devices simultaneously using digital forensics, using different digital forensics programs. Following the hearing, the agency indicated that as of March 17th, 2025, it had 169 devices in the queue of its digital investigative unit waiting to be examined, and provided statistics regarding the number of devices submitted for daily extraction since fiscal year 22, and that's shown in the table on page 38. And then during that March 5th budget hearing, the subcommittee also inquired about whether the management analyst class specifications would be appropriate to support the digital investigative unit if the recommended property and evidence technician class specification series was not approved by the Division of Human Resource Management. In response, the agency indicated the management analyst classification would not meet the specifications needed to support the digital investigative unit, and it was considering that the intelligence analyst class specifications may be a more appropriate alternative. In additional follow-up after the hearing, because the property and evidence technician class specification series has not been approved by the Division of Human Resource Management, the agency indicated that the program officer class specification would be more suitable until that class series is approved. The program officer series would be more appropriate than the intelligence analyst series. So as such, if the subcommittee recommends approval of the new positions, fiscal staff recommends a technical adjustment to change the recommended management analyst class specification to a program officer class specification for the 4 recommended positions in Decision Unit E275. So as shown on page 39, the decisions for the subcommittee are: does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $622,824 in fiscal year 26 and $741,253 in fiscal year 27, inclusive of the noted technical adjustment, to fund 6 new positions and associated operating equipment and vehicle costs included in Decision Unit E275? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $139,231 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium to fund license agreements for software utilized in digital forensics investigations as recommended by the governor in Decision Unit E285? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the transfer of 1 position and associated costs totaling $217,163 in fiscal year 26 and $216,545 in fiscal year 27 from the Division of Parole and Probation's budget account to this budget account to support digital forensics and cold case operations as recommended by the governor.
All right, members, any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Chair Taylor for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keeping in line with the theme of not being able to do everything we'd like to do, I have an alternative motion. I recommend approval of 1 new DPS sergeant position and 2 new program officer grade 33 positions and associated operating equipment and vehicle costs in decision unit E275. Additionally, I recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $139,231 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund license agreements for software utilized in digital forensics investigations and recommended by the governor in decision unit E285. And I recommend approval of the transfer of 1 position and associated costs totaling $217,163 in fiscal year 2026 and $216,545 in fiscal year 2027 from the Division of Parole and Probation's budget account to this budget account to support digital forensics and cold case operations as recommended by the governor in decision unit E901.
Second.
A motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on the motion? Could-
You got it?
Yes. So, in summary, we definitely agree that we need to make some investments in this area and help address some of the workload. But decided to remove 1 of the officer positions and 2 of those management analysts from the governor's recommendation. That's the quick summary. Thank you. Members, any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. And we're going to take another quick 1-minute recess. Okay, I think we're going to have the committee come back to order, and we will now move on to the second major decision unit in this budget account. Mr. Weber, please take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Watts. As you just mentioned, the second major closing issue for this account begins on page 39 of the closing packet, and it is in regards to a new illicit cannabis unit, for which the governor recommends general fund appropriations of $679,919 in fiscal year 26 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new DPS sergeant position and 4 new DPS officer positions and associated operating costs to establish an illicit cannabis unit. Of the 5 new positions, 3 are recommended to begin in fiscal year 26, while 2 positions are recommended to begin in fiscal year 27. Also included in the recommendation is $371,897 for equipment, including 5 new vehicles and 2 aerial drones. According to the agency, the investigation division's current resources are insufficient to investigate unlicensed cannabis activities, and the agency has no staff dedicated to combat the illicit cannabis market, which has continued to grow since adult use of recreational cannabis became legal in Nevada on January 1st, 2017. The passage of Senate Bill 328 of the 82nd legislative session granted the Cannabis Compliance Board with additional powers to address unlicensed cannabis activities, including referring matters involving the illicit cannabis market to the Investigation Division for further investigation and possible criminal prosecution. The agency indicates no proactive investigations were performed over the 2023-2025 biennium, and only egregious investigations have been conducted. Moving on to page 40. The agency indicates while the Cannabis Compliance Board regulates the licensed cannabis industry, the illicit cannabis market has thrived, directly impacting Nevada by reducing tax revenue, creating environmental hazards, and exposing youth to the effects of cannabis. To start a new unit specifically designated to combat the illicit cannabis market, which according to the agency has grown, but without specific data relating to the scale of illicit cannabis within the state, the agency indicates a task force of 5 appears reasonable, and that amount of staff is utilized in other task forces involving cooperation from local law enforcement. However, information regarding the level of participation from other state and local law enforcement entities in regards to the illicit cannabis unit is not known at this time. And the agency indicates the DPS sergeant position would supervise the 4 DPS officer positions who would serve as detectives to investigate the illicit cannabis market in the northern and southern regions of the state. During the March 5th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired how many illicit cannabis referrals have been made to the investigation division and whether there was a backlog of illicit cannabis cases. And in response, the agency indicated it did not currently have a backlog of illicit cannabis cases, and illicit cannabis investigations were not a priority when compared to investigating activities involving more dangerous drugs. The subcommittee also expressed interest in how the agency would measure its success in combating illegal cannabis market and whether representatives from other local law enforcement agencies would be assigned to support the illicit cannabis unit. And in response, the agency indicated it would determine the success of the unit based on the amount of evidence collected. And instead of pursuing individual users, it would focus its efforts on investigating mid to high level drug traffickers and dismantling drug organizations. As such, and as shown on page 40 of the closing packet, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations totaling $679,919 in fiscal year 26 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to support 1 new DPS sergeant position, 4 new DPS officer positions, and associated operating costs to establish an illicit cannabis unit as recommended by the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Members, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I make a motion to approve this decision unit as read by staff.
I have a motion from Assemblymember Brown-May, a second from Assemblymember Anderson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries the Assembly and fails in the Senate.
May I make a motion at this time, Chair? This is for the Senate side. I would make a recommendation for the Senate Finance Subcommittee to not recommend approval of general fund appropriations totaling $679,919 in fiscal year 2026 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to support one new DPS sergeant position, 4 new DPS officer positions, and associated operating costs to establish an illicit cannabis unit as recommended by the governor.
All right, there's a motion from Senator Nguyen, a second from Chair Taylor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, that motion carries the Senate. We'll note that difference and we will resolve that at a future date. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. There are 11 other closing items for the Investigation Division budget account, as shown on page 41, 10 of which are described in the table on the top of page 41. And fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 10 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 11 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 4 in the DPS Director's Office budget account, and request authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Members, any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept the recommendations from staff as read, including the authority to make any technical adjustments necessary.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The seventh budget account, the last of which major issues were identified for, is for the traffic safety budget account, which discussion of which begins on page 43 of the closing packet. The governor recommends transferring all revenues and expenditures totaling $28.6 million over the 2025-2027 biennium from the traffic safety budget account to the highway safety planning and administration budget account, and eliminating the traffic safety budget account. And a companion E900 decision unit is recommended in the highway safety planning and administration budget account, which is budget account 4688. Federal funding and interagency transfer revenues are currently received in the traffic safety budget account before being transferred to the highway safety planning and administration budget account. And consolidation of budget accounts may reduce transparency and oversight of the related revenues and expenditures. But the agency indicates consolidation of the budget accounts would reduce duplicative processes currently required to transfer funds, and would have no impact on the operations of local government and nonprofit agencies receiving funding passed through the traffic safety budget account. During the February 14th budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired about whether any federal requirements mandated the budget accounts to be separate, and why federal funding had traditionally been received in the traffic safety budget account prior to being transferred to the highway safety planning and administration budget account. In response, the agency indicated it was not aware of any federal requirements mandating the budget accounts to be separate, but that they had historically been maintained that way since the Department of Public Safety transitioned from the Department of Motor Vehicles and was established as its own agency in 2001. The agency further indicated several state agencies, such as the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation, and the Department of Health and Human Services, receive and disperse federal funding from the same budget account, and the historical rationale for having separate traffic safety budget accounts was not known. So, as such, As shown on page 44 of the closing packet, the decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of transferring all revenues and expenses totaling $28.6 million over the 2025-2027 biennium to the Highway Safety Planning and Administration budget account and eliminating the Traffic Safety budget account as recommended by the governor?
Thank you. Members, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of the recommendation as read by staff.
Second.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair Watts, and there are no other closing items for this budget account. So I'll move on to these 7 budget accounts that are recommended for staff closing, and based on your preference, I'll pause for questions after each staff closed budget account. So the first staff close, the next 7 budget accounts the subcommittee has not previously heard and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations. The closing recommendations for these budget accounts are identified on the summary page in the closing packet, which will allow the subcommittee members to make closing recommendations for the 7 budget accounts in one motion. The first budget account for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations is for the Office of Professional Responsibility budget account. And the Office of Professional Responsibility is responsible for conducting administrative investigations into complaints alleging misconduct by sworn and civilian Department of Public Safety personnel. There are no major closing issues in this budget account, and there are 8 other closing items as shown on page 45 and 46 of the closing packet. And the closing recommendations for this budget account are included on the summary page in the closing packet. I'll pause for any questions.
Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next budget account.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. The second budget account for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations is the evidence vault, discussed on page 47. The Evidence Vault is a dedicated program that supports all divisions within the Department of Public Safety by providing secure locations to store regularly seized property, money, and contraband from individuals for evidentiary, safekeeping, or destruction purposes. As this is a staff closed budget, there are no major closing issues, and there are 6 other closing items as shown on page 47 of the closing packet.
Members, any questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. The third budget account for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations is the DPS Forfeitures Law Enforcement budget account, as shown on page 49. And this budget account is supported by federal and state forfeiture proceeds based on estimated forfeiture activity, and expenses are budgeted for the pass-through to local governments and to divisions within the Department of Public Safety. There are no major closing issues, and there's 1 other closing item as shown in the table on page 49.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, please go on.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division for the record. The next budget account that fiscal staff has developed closing recommendations for is the Dignitary Protection budget account shown on page 51. And the Dignitary Protection detail provides security to the governor and members of the First Family and provides 24-hour, 7 days a week security at the governor's mansion in Carson City. And this budget account is entirely funded with general fund appropriations. There are no major issues, and there are 5 other closing items, the first 4 of which are shown in the table on page 51, and I would note that a budget amendment was submitted to align transfer amounts between the Capitol Police budget account from the Dignitary Protection budget account to fund 4 positions assigned to the governor's mansion detail as sufficient authority to support the associated budget expenses was not originally included in the budget. So on March 31st, 2025, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment to correct the error and align these transfer amounts, which results in additional general fund appropriations of approximately $500,000 over the 2025-2027 biennium.
Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the next account.
Thank you, Chair. The next account recommended for staff closing is the Nevada Highway Patrol K-9 program account. And the Department of Public Safety's K-9 program is budgeted for 8 K-9 teams comprised of 1 Nevada Highway Patrol officer and 1 K-9 per team. So it's funding for eight dogs. Program operating expenses, including K-9s, equipment, training, dog food, and veterinary care, are funded with forfeiture funds, which are then transferred into this budget account. As shown on page 53, there are no major issues and no other closing items.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Next account.
Thank you, Chair Watts. The 6th budget account for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations is the Highway Safety Planning and Administration budget account, and discussion of which is shown on page 55. The Office of Traffic Safety is responsible for the state's highway safety plan pursuant to Nevada revised statutes. And this is the other budget account in the Office of Traffic Safety that budget account 4687 would be eliminated and transferred into. And this budget account is primarily funded with highway funds, federal funds, and fund transfers from the traffic safety budget account. There are 5 other closing items for this budget account, all of which appear reasonable to fiscal staff.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the last staff closed budget.
As indicated by the chair, this is the last staff closed budget. It's for the motorcycle safety program. It's discussed on page 57, and the motorcycle safety program it's a program for the education of motorcycle riders, and it's branded as Nevada Rider. It was established in 1991 for the purpose of planning and administering a safety program to educate and train motorcycle riders and increase general public awareness of motorcycles by other road users. There are other 5 closing items as shown on page 57, all of which appear reasonable to fiscal staff.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we can move to the proposed motion.
The decision before the subcommittee members, as shown on page 59, is fiscal staff recommends the following budget accounts be closed as recommended by the governor with the technical adjustments noted, and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. Budget account 201-4707, DPS Office of Professional Responsibility, with closing item 6 consistent with the subcommittee's action on decision unit E249 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. It's budget account 4706. Closing item 7 with the noted technical adjustment to correct the position grade in decision unit E275, and closing item 8 with the noted technical adjustment to correct the position grade in decision unit E277. Right. Budget account 201-4701, DPS evidence vault, with closing item 6 consistent with the subcommittee's action on decision unit E249 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. That's budget account 4706. Budget account 101-4703, DPS Forfeitures Law Enforcement. Budget account 101-4738, DPS Dignitary Protection, including budget amendment A257-604738 in other closing item 5 to align the transfer amounts between the Dignitary Protection budget account 4738, and the Capitol Police budget account 4727, to include all costs associated with the Governor's Mansion detail. Budget account 101-4705, DPS Nevada Highway Patrol K-9 program. Budget account 101-4688, DPS Highway Safety Planning and Administration. And budget account 101-4691, DPS Motorcycle Safety Program.
Members, any last questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept staff's recommendation as read, and additionally that we give them the authority to make any technical adjustments necessary.
Second.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
And if it's the chair's preference and based on direction, if we can go back to the motion to approve the other items in the Nevada Highway Patrol budget account, the other item numbers were misaligned, and that motion should be rescinded, and I'll restate the motion for the record.
Thank you. I would accept a motion to rescind the motion indicated by staff.
I move that we rescind the motion as indicated by staff.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now we'll turn it back over to Mr. Weber for the corrected motion.
Thank you so much, Chair Watts. Tom Weber, LCB Fiscal Division, for the record. As mentioned, these other closing items are for the Nevada Highway Patrol, and this motion is shown on page 28 of the closing packet. So fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 through 20 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item 21 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 4 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. Other closing item 22 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 1 in the DPS Director's Office budget account. Other closing item 23 be closed contingent upon and consistent with the subcommittee's recommendation of the associated major closing issue 4 in the Training Division budget account. Other closing item 24 be closed with the noted technical adjustment, and request authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Seeing no discussion, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept staff's recommendation as read, and that we also give them authority to make any technical adjustments necessary.
Second.
We have a motion from Chair Taylor, a second from Assemblymember Brown May. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. And that motion carries. All right, thank you very much. That concludes our budget closings for the day. The last item on our agenda today is public comment. If anyone would like to make public comment here in Carson City or down in Las Vegas, please come forward. If you're on the phones, it's time to dial in. Seeing nobody coming forward in person, AVH, would anyone like to provide public comment by phone?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, we don't have any callers to provide comment.
All right, thank you all for your time. This meeting's adjourned.